As for the rest of the house and the property, we didn't find anything else, Gordon replied. Peter sighed, looked down, and said, wow, you couldn't find anything to help, huh? Well, the only thing that surprised me a bit was how cold the basement is. It's actually kind of refreshing in this heat, you know, Gordon adds. Yeah, but that will not find her, I guess. Is there anything else I can help with? Peter asked. No, probably not. Officer Campbell took your statement, correct? Gordon asked. Peter nods and said, yes, I told him what I remember, which actually isn't much, since I was drunk and passed out last night. I just feel like this is my fault. Peter, it's not your fault. Don't keep blaming yourself, Laura reminded him. Well, hopefully we will be able to find her soon, Peter. Gordon reached in his shirt pocket and removed a business card. Here's my card, Peter. Please contact me or anyone in the Wharton police station if you can think of anything that could help. Peter took the card and said, thanks, Gordon, I will let you know. Oh, this may seem a bit weird, but when you were searching the house, did you see any sign that the house may be haunted? Gordon was slightly taken aback by the question, but he responded, honestly, we did not really search the house with that in mind. Though, I didn't see or hear anything that I can remember that would have indicated that it is haunted. I'm not even sure what I believe about that stuff anyway. But the basement is unusually cool, right? Peter asked. Well, that it is, but I'm sure there's something other than a supernatural reason for it, Gordon replied. Well, thanks for your help, Gordon. I'll give you a call if I can think of anything else that might help. I just want to find Sarah now, Peter said. I know this has got to be difficult, Peter. We have our best men and women working on the case, Gordon reminded Peter. If anyone can find Sarah, it'll be Gordon and his deputies. Mark and the other officers will do a fine job as well, Laura added. Thanks, Laura. Peter, you have a very good lawyer. She keeps us honest, Gordon said with a smile. I try, Gordon, I try, Laura said, smiling back at Gordon. Well, Peter, again, just call me if you need anything. Take care, he said as he nodded slightly and began to walk toward his patrol car. Thanks again, Gordon, Peter said. See you later, Gordon, Laura said as Gordon passes by. Peter and Laura looked at each other and started walking toward the front steps, then onto the front porch. The door was still unlocked and partially open. Peter pushed the door open the rest of the way and held it open for Laura. They walked into the foyer. Peter closed the front door behind them, and it squeaked as it shut. Peter turns toward the living room. He pointed toward the living room with his hand and offered, would the living room be okay to talk, Laura? That should work fine, Peter, Laura replied as they began walking toward the living room. As the two walked into the living room, Laura commented, didn't you two just move into this house recently? Everything in here seems like it belongs here. Oh, that's because most of the furniture was here before we moved here. We only bought a few pieces from our old apartment, Peter replied as they made their way to a set of chairs near the front window. Why would someone leave that much furniture in a house? Laura asked as she sat in one of the chairs. Well, as I understand it, the house was owned by the sister of the previous owner. The previous owner was a Mildred Croft. After she was declared dead, her sister got possession of the house. The sister was, oh yeah, Dolores Winter. I guess Dolores had enough furniture in her house, and she just wanted to sell the house. So she ended up selling it with most of the furniture in it. I guess she just removed a few meaningful things and left the rest, Peter replied as he took the other chair near the window. Mildred Croft, why is that name familiar to me? Wait, wasn't that the older woman who disappeared a few years ago? Laura asked. Yes, that's what I was told. I guess her husband disappeared in the mid-80s, too, Peter replied. And now your wife Sarah has disappeared from the same house. What do the police think about a connection between them? Laura asked. Not much of a connection as far as I can tell. The police know about it, but I'm not even sure Gordon even knows about it. Perhaps I should let him know about it, Peter replied. Oh, I can talk with him about that next time I see him. That's an interesting angle though. That may help take some of the heat off you at least. I'll see if I can steer them to investigate the past before they go after you too seriously, Laura replied. Well, that would be nice if they would look for what really happened. I really don't think I had anything to do with her disappearance. I know I was drunk and I only remember a few things from last night, but I can't imagine that I would have done anything to harm Sarah, Peter commented. Okay Peter, let's go over the details. I know I'll be able to get the notes and other evidence from the police and sheriff offices, but I want to hear it from you. The more I know, the better I'll be able to defend you and make sure they don't even charge you, Laura said as she prepared her notepad and pen for taking notes. Sounds good to me. Where would you like me to start? Peter asked. Well, my guess is that the police started asking about yesterday, so let's go back to when you moved here or maybe even when you were told about the house, Laura suggests. Sure, I'll start with our visit to the Wharton and the meeting with Carl Bishop, Peter replied. Okay, you may start then, Laura said as she begins to take notes. Peter related what happened to Laura, from the meeting with Carl until this morning and the meeting with the police. When Peter was finished telling Laura what he remembered, Laura wanted to go back to something he alluded to earlier. Laura paused a moment and asked Peter, okay, when Sheriff Hughes was here, you asked him about this house being haunted. Do you think that it is? Peter took a deep breath and replied, well, honestly I'm not too sure about it myself. I have heard a few strange things. It was Sarah that was hearing voices usually at night. I apparently managed to sleep through most of the things she heard, though. The only thing I actually heard was something that sounded a bit like a sigh, and that was only once. But it was Sarah that was hearing most of the voices and other sounds, Laura asked. Yes, again, I really didn't hear too much. Oh, she was looking through the offices a few nights ago and a desk drawer slammed shut, Peter tells Laura. Did you see the drawer shut yourself or did only Laura see it? She asked. I heard it shut, but I was in this room and Sarah screamed right after I heard it shut, Peter answers. Laura paused again and asked Peter carefully, do you think there's any possibility that Sarah could have been imagining the voices and maybe shut the drawer herself? Peter stared down for a moment and took a deep breath. After thinking for several seconds he answered, well, I suppose it could be possible, but I don't think that's something she would do. It's just not like her to do that. Laura carefully continued, Peter, to help figure out what happened to Sarah, we will need to determine her mental state. Peter nodded his head slowly and answered, yeah, I guess you are right. She didn't have any mental problems that I knew of. I'm not sure she was totally happy here, but I thought she was ready to keep giving it a try at least. Okay Peter, I should have enough for now. Are you going to be okay? Laura asked. Peter paused and replied, I really don't know. I'm really starting to feel very alone and basically useless, since I don't know where Sarah is. He then sighed. Peter, the police and sheriff officers are working very hard on this case. There probably is not much else you can do now, Laura responded. Oh, have you thought about contacting her relatives? Laura asked. I suppose I should call them. Her parents are in Arizona, so I don't know if they would come or anything like that. I may even wait until tomorrow, just on the chance this is just some kind of misunderstanding, Peter replied. Any chance they may know where she is? Laura asked. I really don't think she would just leave me like this and go to them. I'll still wait until tomorrow to call them, Peter said as he stood up. Thanks so much for your help, Laura. There are so many questions I have on this, but at least you are able to calm me down enough to deal with things rationally. Just trying to help, Peter, she replied as she stood up from her chair as well. They walked together to the foyer. Laura reached in a pocket and removed a business card. She then handed it to Peter. "Please call me if you can think of anything else or if you have any more questions," she said. "I will, Laura, and thanks again," Peter said, reaching for the front door. He pulled the door open, and Laura said, "You take care, Peter, and call me tomorrow to let me know how you are doing, okay?" "I'll call you tomorrow. Goodbye," Peter said as she walked out onto the porch. "Goodbye, Peter," she said, turning around slightly as she made her way across the porch. Peter shut the door behind her. He found himself staring at the window pane in the door for what may have been a minute or so. He shut his eyes and the headache pain became more apparent. The hangover still was affecting him. He wanted to look for Sarah some more, but realized there was not much he could do now. Especially in the condition he was in. He was both physically and emotionally drained. After a wide yawn, he decided to go to bed and get up early the next morning to search for Sarah again. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes and exhaled. Afterward, he turned and began to slowly walk up the steps to his bedroom. Lying in bed, he began to realize that his mind was racing, as he thought about Sarah and where she could be. He wanted to get some sleep, but for a change, he was having trouble relaxing enough to fall asleep. There were occasional creaks from outside the room that caught his attention, nothing too strange at least. He tossed and turned for what seemed like hours. Finally, he was aware that he was drifting in and out of sleep. With his eyes shut, he could hear something that was like footsteps outside of the bedroom in the hall. He kept his eyes shut, but focused his ears on the noises. Next, there was something that almost sounded like one of the doors opening, followed by more footsteps getting closer. Still very tired, he found himself drifting off to sleep. Later, he was slightly awake again. Lying on his side, he felt some kind of weight against his back. It was almost like someone was lying next to him. Startled, his eyes opened quickly, but he did not move. Still feeling the weight, he quickly rolled over to look next to him. With the room very dark, and only the moon and street lights providing faint light, it was difficult to identify any objects. He could see the sheet next to him fluttering down, as if someone had just left. He then realized the weight was gone too. His heart was beating fast and he was breathing nervously. Was someone or something next to him in the bed, or was he just imagining everything? He then noticed that the bedroom door was partially open. He shook his head as he tried to remember if he had shut it or not. He closed his eyes again and took a deep breath as he tried to calm down. After a minute or so, he found that he was a bit calmer. He then rested his head again, and was quickly able to get back to sleep. From the filtered light on the back of his eyelids, Peter realized that it was now morning. His head felt much better, and even with all of the trouble during the night, he did feel ready to get up and look for Sarah. He opened his eyes and dropped his legs to the floor. He noticed the bedroom door was now closed. He then remembered what had happened during the night. With the door closed, he started to think that maybe something being in his bed and the door being partially open was part of a dream. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and reopened his eyes. Daylight brightened the room through the front window. He then stood up and walked toward the bathroom door. He opened the door and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. After taking his shower, he got dressed in older housework clothes for searching. He headed to the hallway from the bedroom. The floorboards creaked under his feet as he walked toward the stairway. With his head now clearer, he started to plan out what to do during the day to look for Sarah. As he began down the stairs, he decided to get a quick breakfast, and afterward he would start looking around the house again. Perhaps the police and sheriff department missed something. He had to continue looking at least. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, he made his way down the hall toward the kitchen. After fixing a cup of coffee and a bowl of cereal, Peter rinsed the dishes in the sink, and then placed them on the counter. He turned away from the sink and propped his back against the counter for a moment. Staring across the kitchen, he tried to remember anything he could from the evening that could help him find Sarah. He recalled her going into the bathroom. Later, the only other thing he remembered was hearing, or at least he thought he heard, was footsteps in the hall, and maybe going down the steps. Maybe she had heard some voices again and went to investigate. He nodded his head to himself a few times, and pushed himself away from the counter. He walked past the back door toward the office. The door to the office was closed. Maybe the police shut it after searching, he guessed. He pushes the door open. Looking around the room, he noticed the desk drawers were shut. The files and papers on the desk looked like someone had gone through them. Probably the police again, he thought. He stepped further into the room and examined at other items in the room. The file cabinet near the door was shut like the desk drawers. It may have been searched, but other than that, the room appeared normal. Finding nothing unusual in the office, he turned around, ready to look elsewhere. As he reached the doorway, he remembered the files that Sarah had been researching before she disappeared. He turned back and stared at the drawer that apparently slammed shut. He noted to himself that he would have to look at the files himself, to see if he could figure out what she found. He then faced the doorway again, walked out of the door, and headed to the family room. He stood in the family room for a moment and scanned the room for any clues. Some things did look disturbed, likely from the police search again, he figured. Seeing nothing that would help, he moved on to the living room. He had been in the living room the evening before with Sarah, and similar to the family room, he did not notice anything strange. He shook his head as he stood in the living room. After a sigh, he moved on to the foyer. As he made his way into the foyer, he slowed his steps as he remembered waking up on the floor. He then looked toward the front door, which had been open that morning. Could she have left through the front door? Maybe he had heard something, then was following her down the stairs toward the door, and then he just passed out or something. He gradually realized Sarah could have left him. Maybe she really did feel like she did not fit in here and just needed to get away. He took a deep breath as he continued to think about any signs indicating that she may have wanted to leave. He remembered that she did want to go out to the bar Wednesday. Could she have met someone at the bar? She also was pretty upset with him after drinking too much at the party Saturday. Peter closed his eyes and tried to calm down with a deep breath again. After opening his eyes again, he walked to the front door. He opened it and found the local paper sitting rolled up on the porch near the doormat. He picked it up and removed the rubber band. There on the front page was a photo of Sarah that he had given to the police, on the front page with an article about her missing. Closing the front door, he took the paper with him as he walked toward the kitchen table, looking into a few rooms along the way. He made his way toward the sitting room and stopped when he reached the threshold. After taking a quick scan around the sitting room, he headed back toward the kitchen. He also paused to take a quick look into the dining room. In the kitchen, he sat in one of the chairs at the small kitchen table. He unfolded the paper on the kitchen table and began to read the article about Sarah carefully. The facts seemed accurate, as far as he can remember. It does note that no good clues or suspects have been found in the disappearance and that people could contact the local police with any tips. Without really learning anything new, Peter felt disappointed. He stared out the back window for a while and then changed toward the basement door. He knew he needed a moment to plan what to do next. Nodding his head slightly as he again stared back out of the window at the backyard, he mentally noted the places he wants to check, like the basement, the yard, and the garage. After a few minutes of sitting at the small kitchen table, he stood up. He decided he would check the basement first, so he walked toward the basement door. When he pulled it open, It creaked loud enough that he stared at the hinges as it opened. For some reason, the creaking seemed louder than he remembered. He slowly continued through the basement door threshold. He reached for the light switch to turn on the light. Maybe his eyes were adjusted to the fairly bright sunlit room, but the basement lights seemed dim to him as he began to walk down the steps. The wooden steps creaked as he carefully stepped further down into the basement. It still appeared dark to him. He paused to blink for a moment, hoping that his eyes would adjust to the darker lighting. The large gravity furnace loomed into view to his left as he approached the bottom of the stairway. He reached the basement floor next to the furnace. Standing near the bottom of the steps, he started looking around, and was drawn to the furnace for some reason. As he stared at it, he heard something moving from further into the basement. There was a loud metallic clanging sound, followed by something metal rolling. He turned slightly to see the metal pipe that he found on the floor a few nights before rolling toward him. He was stunned as it came to rest against his right foot. His heart began to race and his breathing went erratic. Goosebumps emerged on all over his body. After staring at the pipe for a minute or so, he slowly bent down to pick it up with his right hand. Holding the pipe, he gazed over toward the workbench area. The two bare light bulbs in the basement did not cast much light in that area, especially with the coating of singed dust resting on them. A blotchy dark vertical shadow could be seen near the workbench and the furnace. It appeared to move very slowly from the near end of the workbench to behind the furnace. It disappeared into the dark recesses behind the furnace. Did he see a ghost? Peter was still stunned. His breathing was still irregular and he could feel his heart beating frantically, both in reaction to what he observed. A feeling of uneasiness consumed him as he came to the realization that there was something happening in this house that he does not understand. Trying to calm down, he closed his eyes. He forced himself to slow his breathing. While still trying to control his breathing, he opened his eyes occasionally to make sure nothing else is in the basement again. Gradually, the goosebumps disappeared, and his breathing and heartbeat returned to at least tolerable levels. He felt the need to get a closer look behind the furnace where the shadowy figure disappeared. After slowly making his way toward the workbench on the far side of the furnace, he observed that it was very dark behind the furnace, due to some areas where the light was blocked by the massive furnace. A flashlight might help. He recalled seeing one on the workbench before, so he got closer to look for it. After setting the pipe back down on the bench, he scanned the cluttered top, but the flashlight was not there. He could swear that it had been there before. Perhaps there was another one somewhere nearby. He reached for the top drawer of the workbench and sure enough, there was a flashlight. It was an old metal one, unlike the missing one, but it would work. He reached in the drawer and removed it. The battery still worked when he turned it on. It was somewhat dim, but usable at least. He then pointed the flashlight behind the furnace. Spider webs hung from the ceiling joists. The rusty metal wall with the thin vertical ribs between the steel panels extended from the floor to the ceiling. With the circular pattern of light cast by the flashlight into various regions behind the furnace, he realized that other than being creepy, whatever form he saw earlier was no longer behind the furnace. He really believed he did see something, but what was it? He could only shake his head. For now he wanted to get away from this room and sort out what to do next. After turning the flashlight off and setting it on the workbench, he took another deep breath, looked at the steps, and walked toward them. With the help of the stair railing, he carefully made his way back up the steps. As he reached about halfway up the stairs, he paused a moment and looked behind himself. He had not heard anything, but he just felt he needed to check to see if anything was following him. He was relieved to not see anything. So he turned back toward the top of the steps, and continued upward. As he neared the top of the stairs and was about to pass through the doorway, he could hear a mid-range metallic ping coming from behind him in the basement. He paused for a moment, but decided to continue into the small hallway adjacent to the kitchen and the back door. Once in the hallway, he closed the basement door behind him to hopefully keep whatever he saw from getting to the upper levels of the house. Though he realized that would be unlikely to stop it, whatever it really was. He returned to the seat at the kitchen table. Staring at the photo of Sarah in the paper, he thought about ways to have more people see it so they can help look for her. Maybe flyers or signs would help. That could be something that Carl could help with, he thought to himself. He stood up from the table, pleased that he was able to refocus his thoughts away from the basement. He walked to the counter and picked up the phone. He dialed Carl's phone number and held the phone to his ear. It rang a few times and he heard Carl answer, "Hello." "Hello Carl, this is Peter calling." "How are you doing?" Peter asked. "Oh, I'm doing fine, Peter. We are still just worried about Sarah and you." "How are you holding up?" Carl asked. "Well, okay I guess. I was able to get some sleep last night after I met with Laura here. Thanks again for referring her to me. I have been impressed so far. I have been going over the house a bit this morning, looking for clues," Peter replied. "That's good that you have been doing better. Have you been able to find any more clues?" Carl asked. "Well, other than seeing and hearing some creepy things around here, I really haven't found anything new," Peter replied. "Creepy things, like what?" Carl asked, a bit slower than before. Peter took a breath and replied, "Well, I heard things like footsteps last night, and it almost seemed like there was something in bed with me once. I also saw this strange dark shadowy figure in the basement this morning when I went down there to look around," Peter replied. "Wow, you are seeing actual figures? That sounds like the strange happenings have really been increasing around your house. I'm still sorry that I talked you two into that house," Carl commented. "Oh, I don't blame you for any of this, Carl. I'm not sure what's going on around the house. I suppose I could even be imaging it," Peter replied. "Peter, I know you well enough to believe that you are seeing something. Where it's coming from, I can't say, but you are seeing something. Is there anything I can help you with, Peter?" Carl asked. "Actually, I was calling because I did think of something that you should be able to help me with. I was reading the paper with the article about Sarah missing and I got to thinking about signs and flyers to post around town," Peter said. Yes, I definitely could help with that. I do make some of my own ads, so it should be easy for me to make something up to post around town. I can also recruit people to help post them as well," Carl offers. "That would be great, Carl. I can find a photo you can scan in and use for the signs. You should be able to use the description in the paper," Peter responded. "Sure, I can scan in the photo. Would it be okay if I dropped by later to pick up the photo?" Carl asked. "Yeah, that would be fine. That would give me a chance to find a recent photo that you can use." "Thanks again for your help, Carl," Peter replied. "Oh, it's the least I can do, Peter. I'll see you later today," Carl said. "Sounds good. See you in a bit, Carl." "Goodbye," Peter said. "Take care, Peter." "Goodbye," Carl said just before hanging up the phone. Peter hung up the phone. Pausing for a moment, he thought about where to look for a suitable photo of Sarah for the flyers. He decided to head upstairs to find a picture. He began to walk down the hall toward the foyer and the stairs. After finding a photo of Sarah upstairs, taken about 6 months before, Peter brought it downstairs. He decided to place it on a small round table near the front door, so that it would be close by when Carl stopped to pick it up. As he was about to place the photo on the table, he gazed longingly at the photo of Sarah. It started to sink in that she was missing. Where could she be? Was she okay? Was she out, or worse? Questions ran through his mind as he stared at her photo. A feeling of emptiness came over him. He knew he was really missing her. He slowly closed his eyes.